Hello, today we are hosting Mr. Sotirios Livas at Brussels Talks. Dr. Livas is a professor at the Ionian University, the legal expert since he practices law since 1992, specializes in administrative as well as civil law and ADR. In addition, he has an outstanding academic profile on international law and international relations in the Middle East. He's an active member of the Hellenic Society of International Law and International Relations and the Mobilities Research Institute. In addition to many publications of articles in international laws, he edited volumes. He is the author of several books, including the monograph, Globalization, Nationalism and Islam. Today, I, Urtok, and my colleague Dimitrios Nikolaidis are going to discuss about Greece-Turkey relations and the developments in the region with him. Mr. Livas, welcome to Brussels Talks.
Hello, it's nice to see you. It's nice, thank you for the invitation. It's nice to talk with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Livas, for accepting our invitation. I'll actually start this interview with a quite recent matter and the withdrawal of Turkey from the Istanbul Convention, the Convention for Domestic Violence and Violence Against Women. What do you think will be the results of this action for the Turkish women, the women on this side? And do you think that the withdrawal could be linked to Erdogan's hate speech about LGBTQ people?
First of all, we should differentiate between what Erdogan has said about the Istanbul Convention and what actually is Istanbul Convention. Istanbul Convention is not about the social nature of gender, as Erdogan has convinced many of his people that, and many members of his own audience that it is. The Istanbul Convention is about domestic violence, is about violence against women. It doesn't talk about the social role and social meaning of gender. It's about the social use of gender as a means, as a reason for violence. So this is what Erdogan has talked about, has said to his people, has said to many Turks, and he has convinced them that the only protector that they need, and the only protector of women, and the only protector the Turks need is himself. And this is what he usually says, and this is what the way he portrays himself, and he represents himself as the protector of Sunni people, the protector of Turks, and the protector of Turkish women. Of course, this will lead to more violence. Of course, this will lead to more violence against women and more violence against members of the LGBTQ community. But what we should acknowledge at the same time is that there will be no consequences against Erdogan for this change. And this is the way he himself says, and the Turkish politicians say, that there will be no consequences because there are many countries that have not signed this convention, the Convention against Violence Against Women, and Turkey has signed it, but has withdrawn itself. So this is a game that he plays, and the game that Erdogan plays all the time. He signs conventions, and then he changes them, and then he withdraws from them, and then he resigns them, and then he enters them again. And this is a game that he plays, and the game that he plays with the international community and with the international institutions in general. And so we should acknowledge that. There will be, unfortunately, there will be no consequences against Erdogan for this matter.
Thank you.
Our second question is about the Turkish diaspora in Europe, Mr. Livas. In the Turkish elections of 2018, the vast majority of the expat community in Europe voted for Erdogan. That raised a high concern to the German state. What is the reason that people trusted Erdogan and voted for him? And is that a serious concern, or should this be maybe a serious concern about democratic countries in such as Germany and Netherlands?
One way to see it is that they trusted Erdogan. One way to see is that they didn't trust Erdogan, but they mistrust Western democracies. They use Erdogan as a reaction. They use the vote for Erdogan as a means to scare, to terrify, to express their contempt, their fear, their disgust for the double measures that Western democracies use against them, for the exclusion, for what they think that it is their institutional cut-off of their rights. So the way to scare Western democracies, the way to say that we are here and we are present, is to vote for Erdogan. It is a parallel. We can say that we could compare it to many Westerners' inclusion to ISIS or enrollment to ISIS. Many Westerners, mainly French, but also Germans and Englishmen, went to ISIS to fight in Raqqa and Iraq and Syria, and many of them were not even Muslims, were not even coming from Muslim families, and they did it because they felt boredom, they felt lack of trust, they felt a void, and they wanted to express this in a kind of Islamic nihilism, jihadi nihilism. So, okay, it's not the same thing, but it's kind of. It's not an Islamic nihilism, it's an Erdoganic nihilism. We vote for Erdogan just to express our disgust, just to express that we are here, we are taking part in this Western experiment, but we are also feeling excluded. So for this kind of exclusion, we take our revenge expressing our vote for Erdogan. If things change, if democracy and Western democracies are more inclusive, things are going to change. So we don't confront fear with by creating more fear, but by more inclusion. This is what I stand for, what I believe.
Thank you.
So in the next question, I'll go back to a quite recent matter from last year, the decision of Erdogan to convert Hagia Sophia from a museum back to a mosque. And this was undeniably a decision that has divided the common opinion. So I would like to ask you, which will be the consequences in national and transnational level? And of course, could UNESCO have had a more effective and active involvement in this decision?
Okay, first of all, one kind of interpretation, one kind of reading this move is to say that Erdogan has used this verbally, orally, as a menace many times. We could say that this conversion has been his favorite trump card, his favorite ace in the sleeve for many years. He used for many years to say that I will convert Hagia Sophia into a mosque. This is a kind of his favorite weapon whenever he talks to his audience, like a rock star, and saying that we will not fill it with churches and we'll fill it with mosques and all these things. So by finally converting Hagia Sophia to a mosque, we could say that he has used his favorite trump card. So we could say that he was finally obliged to do what he has used as a menace many times. So we could also say that his political capital has starting to expire. We could say that he has started to use his weapons in reserve. Okay, so in answer to the other question about what could the international community do and what could UNESCO have done, the answer is nothing. Nothing, nothing, absolutely nothing. International community could not do something more than what it has done. It has condemned it. It has asked President Erdogan to stop the conversion. Okay. What the international community has done in other opportunities was to use culture, use civilization as a weapon against this kind of changes and against this kind of attack to international cultural heritage, like in Timbuktu or in Afghanistan or in other things, in other places where the international community has taken an active stance. But things are different, and things are, as usually, different with Turkey. Turkey has tried, and we'll talk about it later on, I think, has tried, and it usually manages to balance, and to balance in a tightrope, and it manages usually to escape. Okay, because usually the international community is afraid of losing Turkey for good. So it usually lets the Turkish government slip out from a tight place. I think that the international community should start taking a more assertive stance now, but it hasn't done it so far.
Mr. Livas, as far as I know myself, there has been a Cyprus problem. It's not a, even regional problem. It's a kind of problem that exceeds its borders, and it's international level and European level as well. And the solution proposal of sides appear to be very kind of remote, very distant. I mean, one side wants, the whole island as one country, and the other side talks about annexations and things, etc. So nearly half century ongoing problems there. Do you think that the Turkish and Cypriot side will ever reach an agreement for the solution of the ongoing situation in Cyprus? And what would be an ideal solution for both sides? Do you think that there's an intention not to expedite the solution from the Turkish side? What do you think about this?
I think that both sides, both what we say, the Greek Turkish or the Greek Cypriot or the Cypriot state and the Turkish Cypriot community, both sides do not want the solution. They do not want the solution. They do not want the solution bona fide. They do not approach one another, each other with in good faith, and they prefer actually just to stall negotiations, just to pretend that they are negotiating, that they are talking, and in reality they do not want anything.
Why? Why is that?
Why is that? Because it is very difficult for a state to diminish itself to a community, and for a community that it has proclaimed self-statehood to acknowledge that it is just a community. So it's very, very, very difficult for both sides to go back from the positions that they have put themselves on. So it's very difficult for both sides to recede, to withdraw. Very, very difficult. And it's something that they don't want, actually. The situation could have been different and would have been different if a certain kind of patriotism, a certain kind of, we could say, of nationalism could have appeared. A nationalism, a patriotism, a Cypriotic, an islanders patriotism. The patriotism has written about many years ago. Patriotism that supersedes nationalism of Greeks and Turks, and it's about the island itself. And this thing cannot appear. This thing cannot prevail in the present environment.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Livas. In the next question, I would like to ask you the following. In the last referendum in Switzerland, 51.2% of the Swiss citizens voted in favor of the ban of facial coverings such as the niqab. Why do you think they took this decision to vote for the ban? Do you think that's actually, it's in essence a violation of cultural and maybe human rights? And will that lead to demonstrations and maybe terrorist attacks in several European mostly cities?
Okay, people usually pretend to prefer to see the signs of terror, and so they prefer to have a visible enemy. So the visible enemy is niqab, the visible enemy is the veil, the visible enemy is the zabiba in the head, or something like that, or the bird, the Islamic bird. Okay, this is not the enemy. This is not the enemy because it has been proven that ideas do not give birth to terrorism. This is not terrorism. Ideas do not give birth to radicalization, to radicalism, or to extremism, or to terrorism. Most of the terrorists have been people like you and me and Dimitris, who actually do that from reaction, or from many different other factors that are now getting examined. So, okay, by just banning niqab, you give more reasons for people to feel marginalized, to feel discriminated, and to feel embittered. So you give more food to what you fear, and more food to radicalization and to extremism. But actually, I don't think that by banning visible signs of Islam, that you will create more demonstrations, or you will create more terrorist attacks. I don't think that. I don't think that it is connected. Things like this are connected. That ideas are connected to terrorism. Things like that are not very easy, and terrorism is not very easy to understand. There are many factors, many different factors, and I don't think that by banning niqab, the Swiss government has achieved anything. But okay, it's the Swiss citizens' decision to just banish or ban visible signs of Islam.
Ah, Mr. Livas. Okay, thank you. Now I will carry on the conversation with again with the Turkish diaspora living in outside Turkey. So you know, Erdogan's rhetoric does not influence the Turkish diaspora only, but also other Muslim minorities. At least it seems so. Is that correct, or what would be the reason behind this?
Okay, as I answered in the first question, Erdogan has tried to portray himself, to represent himself, to present himself as the protector of Sunni Muslims and in general of the whole Sunni Ummah. This is what he portrays himself to be. This is what he is saying all the time. This is the main focus in his speeches and in his discourse in general. He is exploiting Islamophobia. He's always talking about Christians and Westerners attacking Muslims. He's one of the few Muslim leaders talking about Gaza and about Jerusalem and about the Uyghur minority. But at the same time, his discourse changes all the time. When he has good relations with China, are vanishing from his discourse and from his speeches. And when he's going back to business with, as usual, with Israel, Gaza is also vanishing from his speeches. So it's very interesting to observe his discourse and the different stages his discourse is taking. But I don't think many Muslims are buying this kind of discourse or are believing him truly. It was some years ago, Turkey was portrayed as a model country for many Muslims and for many Muslim countries, because it was a country that was embodying different patterns, combination of Islam and democracy and progress and market and market values and all these things. But all these things have vanished, and Erdogan is going back to Kemalist authoritarianism, but with Islamic veil and with Islamic discourse. So I don't think that the Muslim countries kind of talk. They have their own authoritarians, they have their own tyrants and their own despots, and they don't need a Turkish despot and Turkish tyrant that speaks jihadis in his own discourse and in his own talks.
Thank you very much. So in my next question, I would like to ask you the following. The newly elected American president, Mr. Joe Biden, invited 40 leaders around the world to discuss about the climate change. Among them, he invited Mr. Erdogan, but he did not invite the Greek Prime Minister, Mr. Mitsotakis. Although, in his statements after the elections, he assured that USA will stand by Greece and offer any help in any time. How would you evaluate this choice of the American president?
Yeah, American policy towards Turkey is an image picture of Turkish policy towards the West. Turkey plays with regional stability and plays with the regional alliances. There are many talks about the rapprochement of Turkey with Russia and China. There are many affinities between them. There are many cultural, political, etc., affinities. But things in the Middle East are not very easy. There is Syria's and President Assad's bitterness against Erdogan and against Turkey. There is Iran's own regional ambitions and many ambitions. There is Saudi Arabia's also regional ambitions. There is Egypt. There are many countries who are trying to play this mediocre power role, and they are trying to fill in the gap of the United States. And there's also the United States going back to the Middle East after the Trump administration lacuna and the gap that it has appeared there. So the West is using the carrot and stick policy. It offers carrot and then it tries to beat Turkey a little, and then goes on and on and on and on. And as a copy of this policy, Turkey is playing its own carrot and stick policy by going close to Russia and to China, and by closing its ties with these countries. But I don't think that the West should tolerate all this policy of Turkey anymore, because Turkey has begun to derail, and it has begun to derail even from its own Erdogan's policy, and it has begun to take a violent spiral movement that it could derail the whole region. So the West should take a more assertive stance, and the Muslim world should take a more assertive stance towards Turkey by saying that these are the limits. These are the limits, and Turkey should respect the rules of the international law and the rules of the region in general.
And the final question, Mr. Livas, about Turkey and Greece relations. Despite the political crisis between these two countries, as you know, both countries have a lot of in common in culture, history, the kitchen. Do you think cultural diplomacy can get the countries together? And is there any way of utilizing soft diplomacy with that regard?
Okay, there are a lot of similarities, of cultural affinities, of culinary affinities, of behavioral stance affinities, many things that are common in the two countries and in the two people. But I think that cultural diplomacy in the form of a policy that takes this shape, the cultural diplomacy from above, will not succeed. It's going to fail. It's going to fail because it's seen by the two nations as a coercive policy meant to disregard the traumas of history, all these things that separate us. So what should bring us together, bring the two nations together, is not policy, it's not government stance. Whenever Turks and Greeks, common Turks and common Greeks, as we say, come together, they are the best friends. They are the best friends. And we have, as usually, Turks abroad and Greeks abroad have friends, Turks and Greeks and Iranians and Italians sometimes. Okay, that's enough. No Englishmen, no Germans, no. This is natural. This is only natural because we speak in the same way. We look at the world in the same way. So whenever you have some kind of historical crisis, whenever you have a dictatorship in one country, whenever you have an earthquake and things like that, the other country senses these things, and there's a great hospitality and a great movement of encouragement and of friendship. But whenever there is this cultural diplomacy thing with the two prime ministers coming together and dancing together, and this is awful. These things that all Greeks and Turks hate, and they feel disgusted about it. But when the people does that by itself, by themselves, things are getting much better. So I think that this is not a thing that the governments should do, but the NGOs should do. I think that people by themselves should do, authors should do, composers should do, actors should do, you and me and us should do, but not the governments, not the politicians.
Okay, so no politics should be involved, and we should like follow the way of culture and education in a way.
Yes.
Mhm.
But whenever there's a coercive stance, a coercive thing that we should go together, we should come together, we should be friends with Turks, we should. This is condemnable. This is a thing that leads only to disaster.
Mhm.
Because it seems as something that covers up all the things that have been done in history in the past. No, history is history. About the past and about the history in a different way, and this is only natural. Okay, but we shouldn't try to change that. We should try just to understand that even if this is true, we have more in common than against each other.
Mr. Livas, thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks for all your sincere answers. They really put light on many questions.
Mr. Tok, Mr. Nikolai. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.